My name is Mike Edmonds, and I work as a swine nutritionist trying to develop better diets for producers to be more efficient and to raise leaner pork for today's consumer. I'm also a volunteer, and I do human nutrition work trying to help people improve their diets. So today we're going to go over a variety of nutrition topics and how they relate to food labels and why reading food labels and understanding that's important. We'll first start with minimizing saturated fat. Now, fats are an important part of our diet. They provide energy in our diet. They're needed for the absorption of vitamins A, D, E, and K, and they provide taste and consistency to our diets. But with saturated fat, we'd like to have it be about 10% of our total calories. So if we're consuming 2,000 calorie diet, you want to be down around 20 grams of saturated fat in that diet. So if we first look at saturated fat, an example of that would be like beef fat, or in this case pork fat or lard. This is a solid white fat that we have, and it's a saturated fat. And the thing about saturated fat, for example, let's look at an example of some cookies here. Reading the label, there's 3 cookies here, 170 calories. Not real high in calories for some cookies, but the saturated fat is 5 grams in the serving of 3 cookies. That's a lot of saturated fat. If you're trying to have a diet with 2,000 calories and 20 grams of saturated fat in a day, and you eat several of these cookies that are high in saturated fat, you're going to exceed the levels that you really want. Now, if we move over here to trans fats are basically where they take oils and they hydrogenate them with hydrogen, and they're called a trans fat. They take an oil, hydrogenate it, and make it into a solid fat. Now, trans fats are not good for us for a variety of reasons, and they deal a lot with cholesterol. For example, our good cholesterol is called HDL cholesterol. And with trans fats, when you consume them, they actually lower our good cholesterol. That's not good. And then with the bad fats called LDL, or bad cholesterol, they actually raise the levels of LDL, or bad cholesterol, when you consume trans fats. So trans fats do everything you don't want in your body in regards to cholesterol. They lower the good cholesterol, they raise the bad cholesterol. That's why we want to avoid trans fats. So to know what foods have trans fats, you need to look for the word hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated. Then you know that trans fats are in those foods. For example, if we start here with shortening, in this example of shortening, a serving here, which happens to be a tablespoon, has 3 grams of trans fats. That's a lot of trans fat in a shortening. Now, here's a shortening that says there's 0 grams of trans fat in a serving, but when you look at the ingredient listing, you see the words fully hydrogenated palm oil or partially hydrogenated palm and soybean oil. That means there's trans fats in this product, but the government and food labeling laws allows you to have 0.5 grams or less in a serving, and you can call that 0. So again, you can be at 0.5 or slightly less, and you can call it 0, but that doesn't mean there aren't trans fats there. You have to read the labels to see if you see the word hydrogenated in a product. And if we look at other products here, for example, pie crust. Here's a refrigerated pie crust. It says 0 grams of trans fat, but read the label. It says partially hydrogenated right there. So it's got a trans fat in it. It just happens to be a little less than 0.5 grams in a serving. Now, if we look at a dry pie crust here, in this case also has the word partially hydrogenated soybean and or cottonseed oil, but it clearly has them because it has 2.5 grams in a serving, listed on the food label right here. So if you're having 1 slice of pie with this crust in a serving, you're getting 2.5 grams of trans fat in that slice of pie. That's a lot of trans fat. You want to avoid that because what it does to our health. There's lots of products out there that have trans fats in them. Again, you look at the label. It says here the partially hydrogenated, there's that hydrogenated word, and in this case a serving here has 2 grams of trans fat. That's a lot of trans fat. Trans fats are also in lots of candy bars. In this case, while it says 0 grams, you won't see it on the label there as far as not being real high, but You'll still see it if you read the listing. You'll still see the word hydrogenated on there, which is, again, a trans fat is in there. And then when you look at margarines, the same as here. Here's 0 grams of trans fat per serving, but yet when you look at the listing back here, fully and partially hydrogenated soybean oil. So again, trans fats are in this product. It just happens to be a little less than 0.5, so they can still call it 0 on a label. Now here's a product called Smart Balance that does a nice job in regard to this. They do not put trans fats in this product, this buttery spread here. Clearly not on the label, obviously 0 grams in a serving, but they don't even put them in here. And this is an example of a very good choice of a margarine, and there are many others out there. But this would be one that would qualify as a good margarine without having trans fats in them. Now if we move over to sugars and talk about carbohydrates and sugars, they are very important in our diets as far as getting more of them, getting them from whole grains, fruits, and vegetables, so that you get the different sugars there, you get the fiber, and you get all those kind of things. You really want a balanced diet there. You want to avoid having high levels of straight sugar, lots of high fructose corn syrup, lots of candy, lots of things like that, because sugars do not fill your body up as well as eating protein, healthy fat, and fiber and things like that. You need a balanced diet, but we need to keep our sugar consumption lower and use more whole grains, vegetables, and fruits in our diet. If we go to an example of what happens here with sugar, this is a 24-ounce regular soda or pop. And if we look at the amount of sugar in this, and we'll pour this out, this is a half cup measuring here. If we look at this, we can get all that sugar out there. We've got 20 teaspoons of sugar in a 24-ounce soda or pop. And that here is 300 calories. And as a nutritionist, we call that empty calories because there's no vitamins, minerals, other nutrients with this. It's just straight energy. And when you have that much sugar in a diet, you really have to be good the rest of your day with good breakfasts and dinners and things, because you can overconsume sugar, and sugar should not fill you up as well when it's really straight sugar like this and you're not getting other healthier components in a diet. So you really want to try to watch the amount of sugar that's consumed. Now let's look at an example here of peaches. Now here we have peaches, and again, reading the label, a half cup serving has 100 calories, and these peaches say they're in heavy syrup. So they have, right on the label, they have corn syrup and sugar, a lot of sugar in here. In fact, these peaches have about 4.5 teaspoons of sugar in a serving. Again, this is a large amount of sugar. And then if we come over here to these peaches here, that they say these are light, and they say they're an extra light syrup. Again, there's still sugar on the ingredient listing, and in this case, a half cup, 60 calories. So they've reduced the sugar. In this case, we're dealing with about 2 teaspoons of sugar in this can of peaches in a serving. Now, if we come over here and look at the peaches that say no added sugar, they've used a low level of sweetener, and there's a couple different ones used here. One of them would be like a Splenda type sweetener, a low level. And here, a half cup serving is only 30 calories. So you have less calories with this compared to the light and the heavy syrups used there. And the best thing about, you're dealing with canned products here, but in season, if you can just simply get peaches and just eat the whole peach, you're getting vitamins and minerals and fiber, and you're getting the natural sugar there, and you don't need all the extra sugars, because all the extra sugars don't do a lot to curbing appetite in that. So it's important to try to eat more whole fruits and things like that. Or if you're going to use the canned fruits, it's better to have the lighter ones so you don't have so much sugar consumption. Now let's move over here to limit sodium intake. Now sodium, we're dealing with salt. And a lot of different salts are used in foods. Like processed foods consist of some of the examples here on the table, where you're taking about gravies and sauces, ketchup, mustard, lunch meats, seasoned rices and pasta mixes, just a variety of foods that are processed where they add different salt sources to the foods. And we need salt. I mean, salt's important in digestion of food. It helps with nerve and muscle transmission and a variety of things in our body, but we don't want to have too much salt or too much sodium in our diet. In fact, we really, if we could have the sodium at 23 to 2400 milligrams per day, that would really be ideal. But in North America, 95% of us consume well beyond 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. It's not uncommon for people to be consuming 3,000 to 4,000 milligrams of sodium per day. Now, why is that bad? Well, high sodium intakes can increase blood pressure in some people. It can lead to cardiovascular disease, and it can lead to stroke. So it's best to try to consume a diet with healthier foods, limit the processed foods so you can reduce the sodium in your diets. So let's look at some examples here of sodium levels in foods. And I kind of have a rule of thumb where if you consume 100 calories and you have 100 milligrams of sodium, you're really doing a pretty good job there, because for men, for example, they may have 22, 23, 2,400 calories in a diet. And if you're doing that, you're going to be pretty much in line. Now with women, it may be 16, 17, 18, 1900 calories. There's a range in there depending on your age and that as to your calorie consumption per day. So in the case of women, you could consume a little more salt than your calorie intake and still be at 23 or 2400 milligram or less in a day. But let's look at what happens when we eat a lot of processed foods. These are examples of them here. Here's, again, some foods here that have 170 calories, but there's 530 milligrams of sodium in this. That's a lot. And on top of that, here's 1.5 grams of trans fat too. So this is really bad in trans fat and really high in sodium. If you look at another product here, another food you have here, 210 calories, 460 milligrams of sodium. Again, a lot of salt is in this product here. There's also other products here, like this product here has in a serving 100 calories and 610 milligrams of sodium. That's a lot of salt for the calories consumed. Whether you're a woman or a man consuming diets like this is hard to get your sodium down when you're just eating that few of calories and the sodium's that high. There's just a lot of salt put in here. Here's some other things like these Alfredo mixes here. One serving of this is 690 milligrams of sodium. That's a lot of salt, again, in a product. And then here's a product where they have one serving is 230 calories and 930 milligrams of sodium. That's a lot of sodium. The best thing to do is to take like rice, preferably a brown rice that has more fiber in it. Prepare the rice, add some garlic powder and other seasonings to your taste. Use a light amount of salt and get your sodium a lot lower and get the fresh product made from making your own rice, rather than buying a processed food that has rice and a whole lot of salt. So again, this is just another example. And they do make products out there that are lower in sodium, or in this case, sodium-free products, like if you're going to make broths for soups and things. There are products available where you can reduce that. And in people that have cardiovascular disease and need to watch blood pressure and things like that, that's very important to them to be able to do that. And there are products out there you can do that. And then there's also, here's a case of a whole grain cracker that happens to have 120 calories, and yet the sodium level here is only 50 milligrams. So this is a whole grain cracker. It's got some fiber and good nutrients for you, and the sodium on the low side. And they call it here hint of salt as a name. So that is available too. And with what we've covered today, the key here is really the last slide we're showing here. Read food labels. This is what we've been doing in this presentation. Whether you're dealing with saturated fat or trans fats, a hydrogenated word, you're looking at sugar and trying to reduce your sugar consumption, or you're trying to get more whole foods in your diet and less of the processed foods, the lower sodium, the key is to learn to read food labels, compare foods. If you're comparing foods, you have an opportunity to select better foods given the choices that are there. It's just about education and about learning more about reading labels. Now, the United States Department of Agriculture makes a nice brochure that they put out called the ChooseMyPlate.gov. It's a website you can go to, and they have this brochure. It covers all these topics we've covered and more, and it really does do a nice job of trying to have better things in your diet. And then I've written a nutrition health textbook entitled Healthy Eating Made Easy. And it says here on the front, it's straightforward and sound nutritional advice for a healthy lifestyle. To learn more about this book, you can go to the website www.dredmondshealthyeating.com.